Hey, and welcome. Today we're going to dig into two really powerful claims from former President Trump. One is about a diplomatic crisis that could have ended in a nuclear war, and the other is about trillions, yes, trillions of dollars from trade. And as you're about to see, the official story isn't always the whole story. So, our story kicks off with this incredibly dramatic claim of a high stakes intervention. We're talking about a situation that allegedly pulled two nuclear armed neighbors back from the absolute brink of war. Now, that is the stark warning former President Trump said he gave to India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This was during a time when tensions between India and Pakistan were just incredibly high. It's a shocking statement, right? And it's the jumping off point for a really specific claim about how this whole crisis was supposedly stopped. So here's how the story goes, according to Trump. He says he was talking with Prime Minister Modi about a trade deal. But then, he claims, he used that deal as a huge piece of leverage, basically telling Modi he wouldn't sign a thing unless the conflict with Pakistan cooled down. The implication is pretty clear. U.S. economic muscle was used to force peace. But, that's only one side of the story.
Because India's government came out with a completely different version of what happened, a story that is a complete direct contradiction to the former president's claim.
I mean, just look at the difference here. It's black and white. The U.S. claim is that a trade deal was a central tool used to stop a war. India's official response, there was, and I quote, no discussion about a trade deal or any kind of U.S. mediation at any point. I mean, those two things just can't both be true, right? And India's side of the story was really, really specific. They said that all the communication to de-escalate happened directly between the two countries through military channels they've had for years. They also pointed out that the talks actually started because Pakistan asked for them. And they were crystal clear on something that's like a cornerstone of their foreign policy. India has never accepted a third party trying to mediate its conflicts with Pakistan, and they say they never will. So this whole idea of using trade as this powerful weapon, well, it wasn't just a one-time thing for that diplomatic incident. It was actually a fundamental part of the Trump administration's entire economic message. You heard this a lot. The claim was that they'd secured these historic trade deals with countries all over the world. We're talking the UK, China, Japan, the European Union, you name it. And these deals, so the story went, were bringing massive benefits to the United States. The claim was that because of these new deals and tariffs, foreign countries were being forced to pay hundreds of billions of dollars directly into the U.S. Treasury, a huge, totally unprecedented flood of cash coming in from other nations. But wait, it didn't stop there. That number pretty quickly jumped from hundreds of billions all the way to trillions. The claim became that the U.S. was pulling in revenue far beyond billions, all thanks to these trade policies. And what was the supposed impact of all this cash? Well, it was huge. This massive flow of money was framed as this incredible boost for the U.S. economy, giving direct help to really important sectors like farming and manufacturing. Okay, but this whole story of other countries just cutting checks to the U.S. Treasury, it kind of makes you wonder, right? How does that actually work? It raises a really basic question about tariffs, which were a huge part of this strategy. Yeah, this is the million-dollar, or I guess trillion-dollar question. When the U.S. government puts a tariff on goods from another country, who really pays the bill? So let's just get on the same page real quick. A tariff is, at its heart, just a tax. Simple as that. It's a tax that a government places on goods and services that are being imported into its own country. Okay, so here's the really important part. Let's just follow the money. A company in another country sells something to the U.S. A U.S.-based company, an importer, buys it. Well, it's that U.S. importer that actually writes the check for the tariff tax to the U.S. government. Now, that extra cost doesn't just vanish. It often gets passed on to other U.S. businesses and eventually to the American consumer in the form of higher prices. And this isn't just one person's opinion. The consensus among pretty much all trade experts is that the financial hit from a tariff usually lands on the domestic importers, American businesses, not the foreign governments themselves. So when you step back and look at all this, what do you see? You've got two really interesting case studies. On one hand, a huge diplomatic claim that was flatly contradicted. And on the other, an economic claim about trillions of dollars pouring in from overseas that seems to clash with the basic mechanics of how tariffs even work. And that really leaves us with a big question to think about. Whenever we hear leaders talking about trade, it's always worth asking, what's the political message they're trying to send? And what's the actual economic mechanism at play? Because telling the difference between those two is the key to understanding what's really going on.